The reading of our gospel lesson today comes from Luke 21, verses 25 through 36. When the Son of Man appears, strange things will happen to the sun, moon, and stars. The nations on earth will be afraid of the roaring sea and tides, and they won't know what to do. People will be so frightened that they will faint because of what is happening to the world. Every power in the sky will be shaken. Then the Son of Man will be seen coming in a cloud with great power and glory. When all of this starts happening, stand up straight and be brave. You will soon be set free. Then Jesus told them a story. When you see a fig tree or any other tree putting out leaves, you know that summer will soon come. So when you see these things happening, you know that God's kingdom will soon be here. You can be sure that some of the people of this generation will still be alive when all of this takes place. The sky and the earth won't last forever, but my words will. Don't spend all of your time thinking about eating or drinking or worrying about life. If you do, the final day will suddenly catch you like a trap. That day will surprise everyone on earth. Watch out and keep praying that you can escape all that is going to happen and that the Son of Man will be pleased with you. May God add his blessings to these words. Well, as we get nearer to our second anniversary in this pandemic, of being in this pandemic, which for us, we voted to, it was the second anniversary, I think, when the pandemic started, right about December. So we started worshiping from home in March, around St. Patrick's Day. So it feels like we've been in this pandemic in some ways forever. But then I got to thinking about, well, how would it feel to be a slave in Egypt for 400 years? How long did the Romans occupy Israel? We haven't seen anything yet compared to the people of Jesus' time, when Jesus comes down to earth. And so, as tired as I know all of us are of the pandemic, tired as all of us are at our political rhetoric that renders our government practically useless, as tired as we are of the division in our neighborhoods and even in our families over politics, over belief, over COVID, over vaccinations. It's tough to find hope, but we do have hope. But one of the things that this lesson today that Jesus asks the people with him to do is to be present. When he tells them to stand guard, to be watchful, he's telling them to be present. And so it begs the question, how do we say hello to here? How do we say hello to where we are right now? How do we accept what's in front of us? And how do we guard against numbness, denial, and despair? We have a temptation not to name what those are, because if we name them, it brings them to life. It brings them to the forefront. It does not allow us to escape. And so Jesus challenges us to name and welcome where we are today, even when it is perilous. Just as we feel it today, Jesus describes a world reeling in pain. Roaring seas, distress among nations, people fainting in fear. And Jesus tells them, when you see these things, don't turn away from it. Don't hide. Why is that? Because it's only when we embrace reality, we acknowledge and welcome the here of our human suffering, that we experience the nearness of God. And we've experienced that today as we've shared the joy of Salem finding her voice and sharing her love of Mackenzie, enduring bullying at no fault of her own. We experience the nearness of God in our lives. And I guess that's maybe why we're gifted with grandchildren. Helps us experience that nearness, right? We can take the best of the grandkids and send the worst home with the parents, right? But no, that innocence of a young child teaches us more about God than we ever know by reading in a book. I love that the church year I've come to understand and see the church year beginning the new year when the days are still getting darker. And I love that the Advent season rejects sentimentality and false cheer. And we don't have to start with the swaddling clothes, the twinkly stars, and the fleecy lambs, but the world as it is here and now, real, gorgeous, fragile, falling apart. American novelist Flannery O'Connell once wrote, "To the hard of hearing you shout, and for the almost blind you draw large and startling figures." That's precisely what Jesus does in his prophetic wake-up call. He shouts, he draws startling figures, and he uses every rhetorical device at his disposal to snap his listeners to attention. Be on guard, he warns his disciples. Be alert, stand up, raise your heads, look around you. So Advent begins in the dark. It's not a season for the faint of heart. Whether we like it or not, the invitations Advent offers us are hard-edged. They don't look pretty on greeting cards, but they are life-giving to us nonetheless. They help us to say hello to where we are here. They help us to find redemption in the most of startling places. Number one, Advent invites us to tell the truth. We are invited to describe life on earth as it is. We are invited to shout forth our pain and bewilderment with it, to name seeming absence of God. We're asked to stop posturing and pretending, to come to the end of ourselves, to get real. We are called to dwell courageously in the truth. Second, we're invited to yearn. Now, I'm not talking about the child yearning like we couldn't wait to find out where our parents hid our Christmas gifts so we could go find out what we were getting for Christmas. We couldn't wait for our parents to leave so maybe we could peek inside the wrapping and find it if we didn't find the presents earlier. No, we're invited to yearn, to name the here of our desires without shame or reservation. Advent's a season when longing makes sense, when it's okay to say we are hungry, thirsty, lonely, empty, unfinished, and unhoused. In Advent, we want and we want fiercely. We sit in darkness, longing for light. We sit in exile, longing for home. We sit with aching, empty arms, waiting to cradle a life that's still unformed, still hidden, still in process. In Advent, our desire for God strains toward God's desire for us. Between the clinging and the yearning, we are unmade, remade, and unmade again. We're also invited to wait. Now, in our instant gratification society, that's pretty hard to do these days, to wait. But yet, that's what Advent invites us to do. It invites us to sit in quiet anticipation in the not yet. Eugene Peterson called the Christian life a long obedience in the same direction. And I don't think we can get more countercultural than that. The child we wait for grows in the deep darkness of the womb. Our food is expectation. In this season, we strive to find not perfection, but possibility. And as we heard in the scripture reading, we're invited to take notice, to attend like we are today, to look in our communities, look in our families, look in our leaders. Jesus says, look at that fig tree, look at all the trees, be attentive to the details. Don't theologize, don't rebel in abstraction, don't assume that God is present only in creed, theory, and doctrine. Look at the sprouting leaves. Notice the changing sky. Attend to the mighty movements of the oceans and the tiny movements of your soul and spirit. The God who shows up in a teenager's womb might show up anywhere. Pay attention. And finally, we're invited to imagine. We are called to hope creatively, to hope against the grain. As Barbara Brown Taylor puts it, we're called to trust that darkness does not come from a different place than light. It is not presided over by a different God. With our imaginations, we can hold in tension the grief of our circumstances and the compassion of Jesus who comes to save us. With our imaginations, we can take the long view even as we dwell concretely in the here or now. It was written that the rotten fruit of illusion rarely fills for long. I know that. And it's amazing the ways that we can be filled with illusion, just like we were talking about during our prayer time, of the misinformation leading people not to get vaccinated. This saying, the rotten fruit of illusion rarely fills for long, comes from a place of truth. And so Advent is an antidote to illusion. It cuts to the chase. It insists on the truth. It lays us bare. Advent invites us to dwell richly in the here, precisely because here is where God dwells. It's a place where God dwells when the oceans heave, the ground shakes, and our hearts are gripped by fear. Jesus says, when you see these things, hope fiercely and live truthfully. Deep in the gathering dark, something tender continues to grow. Yearn for it, wait for it, notice it, imagine it. Something beautiful, something for the world's saving waits to be born. And we can see that today in the prayers that we lifted up. In Mackenzie, waiting to be born. In young Sophie, and the trials that she went through waiting to be born. Salem, silent for 9 years, and now able to, in some ways, be born. And one of the things that our young granddaughter spelled out during her rapid prompting method session was, it's only because of my love for God that I am able to, and she put, do my hitting, which I interpreted to mean pecking at the letters. Only because of her love of God was she able to do that as well. Things growing in the dark, seemingly out of sight, but yet coming to full fruition. The trials of our children and our grandchildren give us opportunities to grow even in their darkest of times. And so let us give thanks for the time of Advent. Let us give thanks for the time of peace and waiting and hope. And as we have found out, persistence. Persistence in faith, persistence in love, persistence in belief. Amen.